Kenny gave me the European Cup, and he said, hold that. Bob said, I will come in, sit down there. And he rang me, and I'll never forget these words. He said, you know what I do when I need a writer? I said, no. He said, I ring you.
Welcome back to This is Anfield. Today I'm joined by John Keith, who is a distinguished journalist who's been covering Liverpool since the time of Shankly. So today we're just going to find all about some of John's stories covering the Reds and what he's been up to for the last 50 years, basically. So thanks for coming on, John.
Thank you, Sam. It's a delight to be on with you.
Brilliant. I suppose we'll start then with your relationship with Bill Shankly. How did that come about? What were your recollections working with him, that kind of thing?
Absolutely unbelievable. I started in journalism on the Bootle Times in the early 60s. He was such an amazing character. He had a presence about him, an aura, which only certain people have, and he had it. I was drawn to him from the first moment I met him in the corridor at Anfield, and that's what it used to be like. Today, everything is stage managed, but then after matches, you would gather in the dressing room corridor, the press, and you'd hang around the corridor for the dressing rooms to empty and grab the players you could, the managers you could. And that's where these impromptu press conferences took place. So Shanks would come out in his James Cagney Macintosh, saying, hello, boys. And obviously, if Liverpool had won, he was jaunty and full of fun and vim and vigour. But he wasn't like that when they lost or even drew. And he'd always come out with a line. People like Tom Saunders, he said that Shanks would rehearse his ad libs. And if people like Tom Saunders and Joe Fagan and Ronnie Moran laughed at it, he'd then use it to the press. But if they didn't, he'd come up with another one.
How hard was it to kind of get in with him? And do you have any personal stories you can remember?
Gave me the wonderful privilege of asking me to write his testimonial match programme, which was a wonderful tribute to me, so that he asked me to do it. And I remember when it was finished, he rang me, and I'll never forget these words. He says, hello, John. I said, oh, hello, Bill. He said, I've got this brochure. He says, listen, what happens when your lights go out? I said, pardon? When your lights go out, what do you do? I said, well, I get an electrician, Bill. Right. And what happens if you get a blocked up sink? I said, well, I'd get a plumber. He says, you know what I do when I need a writer? I said, no. He said, I ring you. And I thought, wow. And do you know, Sam, in that moment, I could understand how he would build players up in a dressing room. I've spoken at length to my longest friend in football, Ian Callaghan, and he said that Bill was the great psychologist, Bob Paisley was the great tactician. He made you feel 10 feet tall, you know, it was wonderful.
Over the years, you've worked with obviously hundreds of players, probably.
Yes.
Are there any unique stories that stand out to you in terms of your dealings?
Yes, there are, and it's Liverpool, and it's got to be the greatest memory of all. In 1978, when Liverpool reached the European Cup final, I was writing Kenny Dalglish's column for the Daily Express. So now the day before the final, I got laryngitis. I couldn't speak. So the office came on to me on the day of the game and said, you've got to get Kenny tonight after the match because he wants a column right after the match, phoned over as soon as possible so we get it in the early editions tomorrow morning. So I went to Kenny because we were staying with the team, and I sketchily and scratchily said, I explained I had no voice and I couldn't speak. And he says, no problem. What you've got to do is get down to the pitch after the game while we're running around with the trophy. Note when we're running around, not if we're running around. Very confident. So I had to get down to the side of the pitch, which I did. And as we got near the players' tunnel, they'd run around the pitch. Kenny gave me the European Cup and he said, hold that and come straight down to the dressing room. So I carried this, stewards saluting me as I went down. I carried the European Cup off the Wembley pitch, right down to the dressing room. Kenny had told Bob Paisley why I was there. Bob said, I will come in, sit down there. And so Kenny and I sat on the bench. And I couldn't speak, so Kenny just spoke to me. I didn't have to ask a question. He just talked and talked and talked. And I said, thank you very much, Kenny. I raced back up to the press box. Derek Potter was waiting. he was already got a line up to the copy takers in Fleet Street, because way before mobile phones and computers. And I sort of somehow got the Kenny's column down Derek's ear. He dictated it, and next morning there they were in the early editions. So I think that's a memory that takes some beating, Sam, don't you? I carried the European Cup into the dressing room at Wembley in '78.